I'm so glad I listened to you. This has been really fun. And unexpected, really. So...
Hey, Aaron, are you almost ready?
What are you doing?
I'm trying to get this shot. I just can't get...
Why are you wearing that? Oh...
I wanted to start this video off by saying a big thank you to Val, who contacted me to review his speakers. I'd first heard about the Encores in the XLS series when I had broken my speaker. I had a pair of AV123 Onyx Rockets, and my son had tipped over the speaker, and I was looking for some replacement drivers to fix it. Well, so I went online and I had some people actually suggest, hey, why don't you just build a kit or use these speakers or try this? And I started doing some research into looking at the Encore speakers. The XLS Encores were veneered by Val, and he used this custom veneer. And he said this was the first time he had done it, but they actually turned out pretty well. Here's some B-roll. The XLS Encore speakers are a kit available through GR Research's website, which you can order. Essentially, it comes in a kit form from about $250 to up almost to $600 for the kit. To power the speakers, I used a range of amplifiers. So I used two different home theater receivers, a Yamaha and a Marantz. I also use my reference rack setup. I played a mix of CDs and locally streamed music. I also used some Spotify as well. For this review, I used the Encores in several different scenarios. So I had one in a room that we're in right now, and then I also used them downstairs in a much larger room, like a living room, open concept kind of area, and try to listen to hear the differences. Downstairs, I used the Marantz receiver. Upstairs, I used the Yamaha and the reference rack to kind of compare and contrast between the two. The speakers were pulled out from the wall a good 1.5 feet at least, and then I had a little bit of toe in, pointing in, to give that center image. The XLS Encores had a lot of good tone and detail. They had plenty of bass, and they also imaged very well. These speakers sounded great. Now, there is a difference between the UB5s and these speakers, and I compared them to the UB5s because price range wise, they're kind of similar. So once again, these speakers are actually configured in the almost $600 with all the upgrades configuration. And that puts them kind of close to the UB5s in price, obviously with the Encores being a little bit more expensive. To test out the bass, I used Bon Iver's Perth from their self-titled album. And in the chorus of this song, there's a double bass kick that just is this quick bass that's happening. And these speakers played it great. They had quick attack. There wasn't a lot of bloat or overhang. So the speakers could sound big. They had this ability over the UB5s for sounding like a bigger speaker than they actually were, which is kind of a cool thing. When I compared the ELAC UB5s against the Encores, I think that the bass was just stronger on the Encores, and the highs were maybe just a little bit more detailed. But where the ELACs actually kind of were a little bit better were the mids. So I kind of went into this with a little bit of a bias, thinking that because of the UB5's three-way design and a dedicated mid-range driver, that probably there would be some edge given to the UB5s in the mid-range. And that kind of played out. But what I found is that the tone on the Encores was actually very sweet, kind of, and I know that's kind of an audiophile term, which is pretty gross, but what I mean is that it was had a little bit more bassy tone to, say, the mid-range test that I used was listening to Fiona Apple's Valentine off of the Idler Wheel album. And so there's this kind of heartbeat bass line that's happening, and then her voice comes in. And so I would switch back and forth between the UB5s and the Encore, just listening to her voice. And the difference was obvious. You could hear more detail with the UB5s in the mid-range, but with the Encores, you also got this kind of richer tone that came with her voice. For the high frequencies, I found that they were somewhere in the neutral range. So they weren't fatiguing, nor were they soft. So you got a lot of detail that was in there. So a pretty great tweeter, I think, and high frequency response on the speaker. To test the imaging, I used Elliott Smith's The Biggest Lie off of his self-titled album. And once again, the ELACs, as compared to the Encores, were just a little bit tighter in their center image of his voice just showing up in the middle between the two speakers. Now, the Encores also did a great job of imaging, so they were no slouches in this sense. But there are a few speakers that are this cheap that I found that actually image that well. And so I would say that the UB5s did image a little bit better, but you're probably, unless you're comparing them side to side, you're probably not going to be wanting for any center image. In the smaller room that I listened to them in, I compared them to both the ELACs, and I used two different sets of equipment. So I used the Yamaha and the reference rack. And what I found is that these speakers really love power. So I'm gonna make some comments about how they sounded with the Yamaha, and I'm also gonna make comments about how they sounded with the reference rack. When I listened to these speakers using the Yamaha home theater receiver, what I found is that all of those things I described about the speaker were true. So good imaging, good bass, clear, detailed. But what I found is that when I moved to the reference rack system, all of those things became more true. So all of those qualities and attributes just sort of seemed to kind of come alive and really made a big difference between the two sounds. And so what I found when I was listening to the receiver, it sounded great, had good bass. When I was listening to the reference rack setup, I kept thinking, did I leave the subwoofer on? Is the subwoofer still on? And then I would realize there's no subwoofer hooked up to this system. So it kind of caught me off guard. So would I recommend the XLS Encores? And I would say yes, it's a great value. So one of the great things about buying speakers from GR Research is if you go to the page for the speakers and you kind of set up and pick up your kit and how you've got it configured, you can also see, if you scroll down, all the various YouTube videos that the actual speaker designer created to help you build the speakers step by step. So if you're a first-time builder, this is actually maybe a great way to get in, because not only do you have plans and drawings and those kinds of things, you also have the speaker designer himself going over how to build the speakers, which is not very common for all the kits that are out there today. Well, I've had these speakers for almost a month, and I'll be sad to see these speakers go, but I need to get them back to Val. Thank you for watching the video. I really appreciate your time. If this video was helpful to you, please like and subscribe.